Bankruptcy attorney Daniel Winter, welcome back. Welcome back, Daniel, to Lunch and a Divorce Lawyer.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be here. Always good to talk with you.
Yeah, it's pretty illustrious, man. You are the first repeat guest, so just put that on your website somewhere.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm honored.
So just give us a little history on yourself, Daniel. Just kind of you're a bankruptcy attorney. That's what you do. Tell me a little bit
Right.
about what that means and kind of your path and a little bit of personal history as an attorney or
Right.
life, whichever.
Right. Well, you can call me Dan. I try to be informal. In court, I'm Daniel, but
Okay,
with
sure.
friends like
This is
you
informal.
and
This is informal.
right, with friends like you and colleagues, I'm Dan.
Okay.
So I got out of law school in 1991 from Washington University in St. Louis and moved to Chicago and worked for some various firms and got an idea of what I liked and what I didn't like. And I took that for myself and opened up my own practice in 1999, took over for a bankruptcy firm that was splitting up and then handled their cases, got my own cases. And I've been doing that ever since 99. And really, I do all types of bankruptcy. I do individual bankruptcy for people that have credit card, medical debt, and things like that. And I do that's more consumer bankruptcy. I do business bankruptcy where people have a small business that fails, and a lot of times people have to sign on their credit for their small business, so it ends up
Right.
being a personal bankruptcy as well. And also lately, I've been helping people handle their student loans and getting them into the right payment plan and on the path to forgiveness. So it's been kind of a multifaceted practice. You'd think it's very specialized and very, very narrow, but it's become wider lately.
Yeah, very interesting. Always interesting to me as I feel like it's in one of those two, three boxes like immigration, sometimes real estate, where I'm not an expert, but I do feel like I need some go-to resources in I'm going to call it my business partner list, which you're on, um, because it comes into the family law space with a regularity. And I at least want to be able to issue spot to then say, hey, I think you might have something here. Why don't you call Dan? So,
Right. And absolutely, bankruptcy interplays with divorce all the time because a lot of times people start two households and then they run into problems paying their debt either before or after they split up. And then they have to figure out, well, who's going to pay these credit card debts? Who's going to pay these? And that's part of your job, Peter, is to try to divvy up who has to pay what debts when marriage fails.
right.
And bankruptcy interplays with that a lot. So there are all sorts of things to consider there, but really finances are a big part of divorce work as well. So absolutely, and I always tell divorce practitioners if they have questions, rather than guess, they should give me a call.
Yeah. So you're jumping on today, and these were like three things that were in my head. Number one, I think we just had reconnected at like a networking level in the last few weeks or months, and you spoken about this new. I know you have at least a new website, studentloanlawchicago.com, kind of this student loan niche. I think the other thing, just right at a very general level, right, the student loan topic has like been like front and center at the macro like political debate for a good
Right,
while here.
right,
Well, and just with real world ramifications. And then also, actually, I'm just looking at a Wall Street Journal article that I'd come across just right. One of the news sources I consume,
right.
dated November 16th of this year, 23. Student loan borrowers tap a new path to loan forgiveness, bankruptcy. So
Oh, yeah.
all of those together being, so you're doing some new stuff in the student loan borrower space. Tell me about what you're doing, and then I don't know, maybe we can kind of
Right,
dive into options, whether it be
right,
bankruptcy or non-bankruptcy, and how you're helping people.
right. So what you refer to, and what the Wall Street Journal is referring to is it isn't really a change in law. Okay, so
Okay.
There are bankruptcy options that have always been there for student loan borrowers, but they've been extremely limited. There's a standard called the Bruner standard, after a case that was decided decades ago, that says that you basically have to have what's called an undue hardship. So to prove an undue hardship, judges have said you basically have to not be able to pay your loans for the foreseeable future. Basically, disabled people would get discharged of their student loans in bankruptcy. It was so narrow, and it still is, and there's been no change to the substantive law. What changed, though, is back at the end of 2022, the administration and the Department of Justice came up with a streamlined procedure. So if you have a Department of Education loan, then they have very specific things. Instead of filing a regular complaint, you file the complaint, but then you don't go through all the rigorous discovery process where it's the attorneys create questions and answers, they create requests for documents and things. It's all a standard format. So the Department of Justice says, here, fill out this form, provide the documentation. And it's a long form, but it gives the Department of Justice a standard way to go through these and analyze them on a more streamlined basis. So it's not quite as expensive for the borrower to do it. It doesn't mean that they're going to have any different standards. It may mean that a few more people will get discharged in bankruptcy, and it makes it a little bit easier. But it's still, you have to be the right borrower with certain kinds of either a disability or a very extreme circumstance for me to file that complaint. But it makes it more manageable, I guess is the best way to describe it. So that's the bankruptcy avenue.
So I'm a bankruptcy neophyte, but just to spend another second on that, consumers filing a petition for discharge. I think that's Chapter 7, again, as a neophyte. Right. How's it different if, hey, I want to get rid of this $100,000 in student loan debt, pre-regulations versus current?
The procedure's pretty much the same. You have to file a separate complaint called an adversary complaint in the bankruptcy. So it's a lawsuit within the bankruptcy, and then there's certain procedures as you'd follow in any federal lawsuit, but it's within the bankruptcy case. And so it isn't even legislation, but pre-guidelines, you'd file the complaint, you'd file the procedures, you'd have discovery back and forth, and then the government would have to go through and basically do every case on an individual basis, and every format was different. Now it's just a certain format. You file the same complaint, but it's a format for getting it done a little quicker and easier. So they may decide the same thing, or they may say, well, you know what, this isn't as extreme, but we'll give them a partial discharge or whatever. It just makes it a little easier on the parties. So it sounds like a big deal. I don't think it's as big a deal as it could be. You know, the only way for it to be better would be for the Supreme Court to change the interpretation of undue hardship, or for Congress to come up with a different statute that would make it easier for people to discharge bankruptcy. So it's the same standard, just more streamlined procedurally. So it can make it less expensive for borrowers to do it.
I see. Got it. But we're still essentially under a Supreme Court precedent that
same law,
controls. Interesting. Yeah, because without even doing a deep dive on this article, one of the things I highlighted is, quote, the application numbers remain extremely small, with just 632 borrowers using the new process from, I guess it would have meant November of 22 through September of this year. That's not exactly whatever the US is. I don't know. Are we 300 million these days? I mean, or whatever we are, or, you know, and all the student loan borrowers, 600.
It's not exactly opening.
It's paltry.
Right. It's not exactly opening the floodgates here, you know, so then moving into the other aspect that you were talking about is, what are the non-bankruptcy options, and what's the big deal going on now? After the COVID pause for over 3 years, well, actually, let's talk during the COVID pause, the administration tried to do a blanket student loan forgiveness of $10,000 or $20,000, depending on person's income. And that was challenged, and the Supreme Court said that that was too far, that the president couldn't just do it at the stroke of a pen, that he would need Congress to do something that drastic. So now So now what they're doing is they're making little changes around the edges and really enforcing the programs that are available. What do I mean by that? So they're let's go back a step. There are two different types of federal of student loans. Okay. So if you borrow for school, you can borrow from the federal government. And most people know they have to fill out the FAFSA form, FASFA. Okay.
Yep.
Whether you think you're going to get aid or not, you have to fill it out. And under that, an undergraduate student can get $5,500 a year automatically just for being a student, and the $5,500 in loans. Those are federal loans. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes up a little bit after that to $6,500, $7,500 a year, junior and senior year, something like that. That's how you get federal loans. And then for the difference, so school obviously doesn't cost $5,500. So for the difference, they can get scholarships, they can get grants, and they can get other kinds of loans. Okay, obviously, your student would apply for as many scholarships as they can, and grants. Those don't have to be paid back. So, and that's the way to go, is to shop schools to see who can give you the most free aid. Then after that, what do you do to fill up the difference? The difference is either the student can get private loans through companies like SoFi. Like SoFi Stadium, where's that? In LA. They make a stadium because they have so much money from student borrowers.
They're
SoFi,
just the naming rights, Dan. I don't think they.
I know.
Just kidding.
It's but so they pay for the naming rights from your interest.
Right.
And to raise awareness, to have more people borrow from them.
Absolutely.
So yes, I mean, I guess if SoFi wanted to build a stadium, they could too. But and then you've got Discover and other companies, and they give loans, and it's like borrowing for school on a credit card because the interest rates are a lot higher, and there's no protection. There's no programs on. You might get deferred during school, but there are no programs to make it easier to pay them back. It's just whatever they decide, that whatever the terms are that you signed up for. So those are private loans. Private loans don't have the same programs that federal loans do. So federal loans that you get through FAFSA, or the other way to make up the difference is through Parent Plus loans. So if my kid had $50,000 to pay for a year at a school in Illinois, at University of Illinois or something like that, and they could only get $25,000 in aid and loans, the other 25 I'd have to borrow. And that could be Parent Plus loans as well. Parent Plus loans are federal loans too, and they have certain payment programs. So the programs that are available are only for federal loans.
Got it.
Parent Plus or different kinds of direct student loans. And those loans are the ones that we're talking about, private or public, cannot be discharged in bankruptcy generally without what we talked about just before, which is an adversary proceeding, and you have to show that hardship. So those are the federal loans I'm talking about that are available for these programs.
So that's interesting. And let's dive into a little bit more about options, I think, within the federal loan box. But did you just say that even if I have a loan with Discover, a student loan with Discover as an example, it still has that heightened Supreme Court bar? It's still what a wonderful area
absolutely
to live in as a private lender. My goodness.
Well, that's why there was so much borrowing, because the government decided, okay, well, if the private lenders want to lend out money for school, they also can get the same protections. And so the private lenders, then they didn't care who they could lend money to 18-year-olds and not care, because they can never get rid of the debt. Just like
at some level, it seems sort of fair that if you're getting money from the government or something, as a right, if you should have some extra protection, because sort of like, let's just say the general public is all on the hook. My gosh, Discover gets that same thing. My goodness. Wow.
Well, and that's why, so they get all the benefits of loaning money at whatever rates they can get, and none of the disadvantages, which is a risk of bankruptcy by the borrower. So it really ended up being a boon for them, but that's, in my opinion, that's what raised the cost of public education, of all education, was
Right.
the borrowers thought it's free money. The lenders didn't care because they could garnish these people's wages for the rest of their lives.
Right. Interesting. That's new news to me. I always kind of
Well,
thought
Peter,
I didn't know about that distinction. Interesting.
right, but back when you got out of law school, it
Yep.
used to be that private student loans could be discharged like credit cards.
Oh,
But then they changed the rules back in the 90s. I don't know when you got out of school exactly, but they changed the
how old do
rules
you
saying,
think I am? 02 for the record. Just kidding.
oh, two? Okay, so
Oh,
I'm
oh,
older than you. I graduated in 91.
no,
But so I'm a little older. But the point is they changed the law to say that any loans that were given for the benefit of education, for an educational benefit, it's called,
mhm.
are not dischargeable, whether it's Discover or the federal government or SoFi. They're all in the same category.
Wow.
So it was really a boon for those lenders. And I think the government was thinking, well, we can get out of the student loan business to a certain degree and pawn it off on these other companies, and they can make a lot of money at it.
Oh, that's pretty okay. Cool. Well, not cool. That is definitely a new
But
tidbit to me, though. Interesting.
but so back then, private loans were different, and you could discharge them. And also back then, back in the 80s and 90s, you could discharge student loans if they were in repayment for over 8 years. I think it was 7 years, and they changed it to 8, and then they said never.
Okay.
So they didn't want people to borrow money to go to law school and then just go, oh, never mind, I'm not going to pay these loans back. That's not fair. But
Right.
if they're given 7 or 8 years to pay it back, they thought that was a good compromise, and now they don't want the hazard of people going to school and then discharging their loans and making a ton of money later. So that didn't seem fair either. So right now, where we're at is basically no student loans can be discharged in bankruptcy. So now the federal loans
Yeah.
have different
What are some
programs.
options? Yeah, let's talk about
Right. So what happens is for regular undergraduate student loans, they just entered into repayment again. So you don't have to pay while you're in school. Then you get 6 months after graduation. Then they have payments. There are different programs. One of the types of programs is called income-driven repayment plan.
it. Mm-hmm.
An income-driven repayment plan says that there's a certain formula based on how much you make, and that percentage above the poverty line you have to pay based on your income. So if you're making $50,000 a year, your payment might be, I'm just throwing out numbers here, not doing the formula, it might be $200 a month on your student loans, no matter what the balance is.
Now,
And then each year they have to recertify. So if they're making more money, they pay more.
I see. Interesting. Because that's the one I know of a few people close to me, one of whom was a client. That's the one where recently people who have been paying on that for a while got discharged, right?
Right. So then there's some of these programs, if you pay for undergrad loans under one of these repayment plans, and there are various different income-driven repayment plans,
Yep.
but just to simplify it, if they're under one of these programs and they pay for 20 years, then they can get their loans forgiven.
Okay.
And that is automatic if they're in one of the programs. But they can't be in default. They have to make 20 years of payments. And right now they're not construing it as being consecutive. You might have 5 years of payments and then miss a year and then pay more. So that's called loan forgiveness. So for undergrad, it's 20 years. And for grad school, it's 25 years.
Okay.
Under these programs. So that seems fair. You're paying based on what you can afford.
Right.
And you're paying for so many years, and then the government takes the hit for the rest. There's a new income-driven repayment plan just this year by this administration that says that they raised the poverty level exclusion, which means it lowers the payment, and if they're say you have $200,000 worth of student loans and your payment is only $100 a month, you know that the interest is more than $100, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the end, they waive the interest. You're done.
Okay. Wow.
So it's an amazing program called the SAVE program, SAVE, Saving
Okay.
a Valuable Education.
Interesting. Yeah, I've seen the acronym, didn't know what it stood for or
Yeah,
what it did fundamentally.
but that lowers people's payments based on their income. They have to recertify every year, and if they pay for 20 years, they're done.
Great.
Now,
Yeah.
there's one other, and then there are other programs where if you work for a public school or for the public interest for a not-for-profit, you can get the loans discharged after 10 years, 120 payments.
Okay.
So it's all public policy based.
Right. Interesting. So, if I have $100,000 in student loans and I'm struggling, what's my next step, Dan?
So your next step um, is, and actually on my website, there's a way to have your loans analyzed because it isn't quite as simple as boom, you automatically get these programs.
Right.
It depends on the type of loan, and every few years they'd have different, well, not every few years, but maybe every decade they'd have different loan programs. Well, different loan programs are eligible for different plans, and that's where it becomes complicated. But if you go to my website, Student Loan Law Chicago, there's a link. And
Okay.
then what happens is and then you upload what's called your student loan data. It's a text file. And then
Okay.
my program analyzes that for free to tell you what type of loans you have, when they were taken out, what the interest rate is. And then I set up a consultation. There is a consultation fee for
Okay.
people, and I can handle people from all over the US. I actually have a person from the Netherlands who I'm helping who got student loans through the federal government.
That's
But
interesting.
I can help people from all over the world that have federal loans. It doesn't have to just be in Illinois because it's federal law. So then they get an analysis of what their loans are, and then I go through their options in terms of what the best plans are. Certain types of loans, you have to consolidate them to get them
Okay.
the best options. Parent
Yeah.
Plus loans, there's only one type of repayment plan available, and if you want the option of getting better ones, I'm getting into the weeds here, you'd have to consolidate twice. So there are all sorts of different options that what you don't know, can hurt you. And so why is it so important to get into the best payment plan? Well, if you're paying for 20 years, you want the lowest possible payment.
Right.
And it's really distressing for people when they get this, the email saying you got to start paying, and they
Right.
don't know what's their best option. So it's what I do is very affordable, flat rates, just to get people in the right plans. And it's amazing how many people really need this help. I mean, I have my little cheat sheet, but back in October, nearly 40 million student loan borrowers had to start repaying on their federal student loans. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a great service that you're providing, and at a private business level, hopefully a good business opportunity for you. Because yeah, I feel like it is first and foremost in people's minds, and then yeah, 40 million is not a small market either.
Right. And I really just want to get the word out that I can help and that you aren't alone, because if you go through, you can try to do it yourself, but there's so many different choices and prompts to figure out what to do that you wouldn't really know what's best for you. It used to be years ago, like 5, 6 years ago, these student lenders, the servicers they're called, wouldn't even recommend the best plan for people. They'd say, "Oh, you can just defer them." Well, that doesn't help them. That doesn't
Mhm.
help people. Or they wouldn't tell them the best possible plan, and there were lawsuits against the government on all sorts of things. And now they're trying to straighten it out and have the servicers work for the borrower and really get them into the best possible plan, but you really need to know what that is.
Yeah. Well, sounds great. Yeah. So yeah, 100%. Yeah. You have student loan law, chicago.com is a great place to be. And the current administration is doing something else. I don't know if we need to pontificate on that, but they're trying a different route to some end currently, are they not?
Um, like I said, they're more making changes around the edges
Okay.
of the payment plans. Now, as far as student loan forgiveness, there have been schools that have been closed. You hear about closed school forgiveness,
Sure.
and
Sure.
I don't know the exact ones, but there are one schools that didn't give students the benefit of the bargain.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so in the past, students, to get forgiveness on that basis, they had to dot all their I's, cross all their T's, and if they didn't fill out a form right, boom, they were denied. Now, they're really just blanket rules on certain schools where if they went to a school and the school was closed, or the school misrepresented job numbers after graduating, we're not talking your big 4-year universities, we're talking trade schools, barber schools, cosmetology, all these kinds of things that misrepresented what they would get, then it's called a borrower defense to repayment. So they've loosened those up a little bit and made them more accessible. So those are the kinds of things that the administration's doing. And, depending on the politics of it, they're really just trying to help borrowers figure it out. And I think the government's figuring there's so many loans that are unperforming. They really need to focus on getting people to pay what they should pay based on their income. And if people aren't making any money, or if they were lied to by the school, then those should be off the books. So I think that's a general principle that they're trying to go by.
Well, that's great information, Dan. Hey, so this is Lunch and a Divorce Lawyer, one of the great podcasts on, all of your local platforms like Apple, Spotify, etc. So what's a quick nugget? Can you help out this is a real client of ours potentially, or this is in my head, right? People are going into a divorce, or let's just say they're in the middle of a divorce, just with a bunch of debt.
Right.
Right, from cars to I don't know, old landlord tenant debt, or
Credit
maybe some
cards.
credit card stuff. Now they're in a divorce, nobody's filed for bankruptcy. What are a couple just kind of best practices that somebody should think about if kind of you're in family law, you might be getting a divorce in 6
Right.
months?
Well,
What should I
first of
do?
all, can I tell you a quick anecdote that
Yes.
would make you laugh? I had
Yes.
clients sitting there, a husband and a wife sitting there, and I was going through the debts, and they had a debt from JB Robinson Jewelers.
What was it for?
And was for some jewelry. And then the wife looked at the husband and said, I didn't get any jewelry. What's this for? So we can use our imagination, but
right.
But anyway, so number one is don't charge your girlfriend's jewelry on a credit card. But all kidding aside, the best thing to do if you think that you're on rocky financial situation and you think you might be heading for separation or divorce, is to take stock of the debt and figure out whose is whose. Sometimes people are co-signers on the credit card, so it's a joint debt, but who charged most of it, so you can do it that way. But my biggest piece of advice is one thing to remove from the equation, if you can do it, if you can cooperate with your spouse enough, is to investigate a joint bankruptcy together before the divorce. Once you're divorced, you can't file together.
Right.
But if you get your debts taken care of before the divorce, then it's less expensive to get divorced. You don't have to pay Peter by the hour to figure out who pays what debts. Right. And it's one less thing to fight about. You can get divorced a lot faster. You still have children and other things to deal with, but you can pick up the pieces a lot faster if you have the debt eliminated from the equation.
I thought that's what
that's the biggest nugget.
Your good nugget was going to be, because Yeah, I think I'd like to hit a few people over the head with that advice myself, because, it's to me in the family law space, it's just so challenging in the sense of like, basically, is this couple able to work in a way that, at some level it's, it does serve your self-interest, even if you're right, even if you're bitter at Mr. or Mrs. Smith, your ex or current, and but it still would be a great move, and I'm just amazed that more people aren't able to at least cooperate for something that benefits them both, even if you hate this jerk or something.
Well, right, right. I mean, the problem is at that point people lose some of their rational thought
Yeah.
and whatever. And then the other thing is if only one person files bankruptcy, then the joint debt flows to the other one, and then you get a more angry spouse saying, "Wait a minute,
Oh yeah.
Citibank is calling me every day, and this is your bill." And then they get more upset, and it makes it harder to get the divorce agreed upon.
Yeah.
And then it ends up being more money for everybody else. So that's the one piece of advice I always give people that are splitting up is if they can cooperate enough to file a bankruptcy together, that's one thing that they don't have to deal with.
Sounds like a good one. So Dan, just as we're landing the plane here, um, what's your favorite Chicagoland fun activity to do or to recommend to our hundreds of listeners? Expand my world of greater Chicagoland, and you can define Chicago
Well,
however you want. You could be going to Southeast Wisconsin, Indiana
right.
Dunes, Western Michigan, your call.
Well, for the food, I think that the best thing to do is to grab some deep dish pizza at Lou Malnati's. They have restaurants downtown Chicago and many of the suburbs, and it's really, to me, being from Wisconsin, it's really the best Chicago pizza I've ever had. And my wife used to sling pizza for them back at Chicago Fest ages ago. But
Wow. I
and
like the butter crust.
it's really good. The regular crust is good. I like it cut in advance or whatever. But being from Wisconsin, the gooey cheese and the double layer of sauce on the top is really good. So that's the best eats for somebody who hasn't been to Chicago. As far as places to visit, I think downtown going to the Cloud Gate or the Bean as people call it is really cool. And,
Right.
and come here in the summer because it's a lot of fun in the summer with all the festivals. So downtown in the summer is fantastic. And if you have kids, go to the Museum of Science and Industry because that's an oldie but a goodie. They always have good exhibits there. I went there as a kid, and funny thing is I got my wax figure of Abe Lincoln there. Back when those wax machines were still going. So I think Museum of Science and Industry is cool with kids, and going to Grant Park to see the Cloud Gate, the Bean is a lot of fun, and that's a free activity. It's a lot of fun, and just you don't really picture the Midwest as having beaches and a lakefront, but Lake Michigan looks like an ocean, so it's just much different than the rest of the Midwest.
100%. As somebody, as you know, now is spending a good amount of my time in Florida, but I'm really a native Oak Park, Illinois native. And obviously, running a law practice in Chicago. It's amazing how Floridians and people just outside the Midwest don't appreciate the grandeur and like of the Great Lakes as like serious bodies of water with beaches and boating and swimming. It's not some little puddle. These are massive bodies of water.
Right. And you don't expect such a beautiful lakefront. You think of Chicago as a, big dirty city and all this stuff, but you don't expect a gleaming lakefront right in the middle of downtown. It's really a sight to behold. It's really beautiful.
Well, those are good tips. I would definitely double or agree with those. Not a huge pizza guy at some level, trying to be healthy, but like loving Lou Malnati's when I do have pizza. So, Dan, thanks again for being a double repeat guest, and tell me a little bit just about kind of who's the client, who should be checking you out, and where can people find out more information about how you can help and serve them as a potential student loan borrower or a
Right.
bankruptcy client
Well,
or both.
really just anybody that has, I'm calling myself the debt doctor. Anybody that has debt that needs help trying to figure it out. I have my Juris Doctor, and my doctorate is now in debt. So really the idea is to have people that are having problems with their debt, if they're struggling paycheck to paycheck with a lot of credit card debt, or if they're overwhelmed with trying to figure out what to do with their student loans. So, it takes all different kinds of people. Everybody has, different financial issues. So I can help, protect assets. Believe it or not, people don't lose everything in bankruptcy. So it's better to see me before you get sued, before you get a wage garnishment, or
Yeah,
before you have this major life event of a divorce. You really want to plan ahead of time so you don't have to rush and be really stressed. I mean, Peter, when people have a lawsuit pending, it makes everything a lot more stressful. But if you can plan ahead and figure out, what am I going to do with this debt every month? I seem to be making money, but it's all going out in bills. Well, why is that? And that's when you start calling a lawyer. Ideally, I'd like to have people call me before they get sued, but human nature is, I think people just procrastinate. And so if you can deal with your debt as a New Year's resolution, that's the way to go.
good one. Your bankruptcy website is what, Dan?
And so it's bankruptcylawchicago.com, all one word, Bankruptcy Law Chicago. And then if you need student loan help to start the process, you go to studentloanlawchicago.com. It's also connected on my bankruptcy site. But so Student Loan Law Chicago is the non-bankruptcy options on student loans. And really, just any kind of debt, just contact me, give me a call, and I'm happy to go over your situation.
All right. Well, thanks again for your time, Dan. Always appreciated.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Great talking with you, and enjoy the rest of the day.
You too. Bye.